All right, Joey, let's talk about Illinois football. And how we're going to do this is we have had very little access to actually seeing practice. What we have been able to see is a lot of good stretching, a lot of pliability out there, Joey.
Special teams.
A lot of good special teams that we've seen, like watching Andy Boo take these guys through being runners, gunners, all those different things, blockers. It's been fun to watch, but very little individual drills. But we have met with a lot of the assistants. We have met with a lot of the players and of course, Brett Bielema and the coordinators as well. So we've had about a week of training camp practices. We're 5 practices in, I believe. Six practices in as we record this on August 9th. So let's just go back and forth here. And we're going to talk about what we've learned from Illini training camp so far. So a thing that stuck out, I'll let you go first, Joey, is just whatever comes to mind, what you think has been interesting so far that you've learned.
I mean, I think we've got to start with Matthew Bailey.
That was number one.
Yeah, I mean, you and I project him as a starter. I don't think that's unfair to do. I think it's very reasonable to think that. And he has been out as he continues to deal with the same injury that held him out in the spring and apparently impacted him in the summer, for still impacting him. We've seen him in a walking boot. We've seen him on a kind of a scooter. And today we saw him on crutches. Brett Bielema has said he remains hopeful that Matthew Bailey will return to practice a few weeks. It sounds like before the Toledo game, which kind of getting closer to that here. But if you see a guy in a boot with the season less than a month away, it's probably fair to wonder. But they need Matthew Bailey, man.
Yeah, so Matthew Bailey broke his foot in the offseason, dropped a weight on his foot, broke the foot, sat out most of spring ball or all spring ball. And then, during the summer, I think he was healing. They were watching that process. And Brett Bielema said the other day there was a setback. We don't know what that setback was. But the first day we get to training camp, we see him with a walking boot on and rolling around in one of the scooters where you don't put any pressure on your foot. And then today we see him on crutches. Now, maybe this is just to protect him from himself so he doesn't push it. So that would be the optimistic view. But when I'm 4 weeks out from the season opener and I see Matthew Bailey on crutches and wheeling around, and I saw him, limp around a little bit, like I'd question whether he'll be ready for the opener, which means adding those transfer safeties and Clayton Bush, who's a free safety, Demetrius Hill. I'll ask Aaron Henry. He's been thought of as a free safety, but if Bailey happens to be out, I think he could potentially come up in the box. But Nicario Harper, who sat out practice today, didn't look like anything serious. He's an important piece at strong safety, but depth might be really important here. And two of the main guys that are depth right now at safety are, walk-ons guys. Solo Turner potentially is a strong safety, could be the third string guy. If Bailey's not playing, he steps up in the depth chart. And then Miles Scott's gotten some buzz since the spring, since he moved from wide receiver to safety. Now he's more of a free safety type. So I think he would give depth there, but yeah, safety depth gets interesting there. And Brett Bielema told you the other day, like they think some of those guys can be interchangeable at times at safety based on what they do. But Matthew Bailey projected to be a strong safety. So Nicario Harper is going to be really important there and potentially depth beyond him.
Yeah, absolutely. And at a position where you're replacing 4 or 5 starters in your defensive secondary, all 3. I don't know if we should still call nickel a safety because the nickels we've seen practicing with Antonio Finellis and the cornerbacks, but the point being 3 guys they considered safety positions last year, and then obviously Devin Witherspoon. So, yeah, they added depth in the offseason a lot, kind of pretty steadily, right? First it was Nicario Harper, then it was Demetrius Hill. I think that order's right. And then Clayton Bush.
And don't you perk up and think maybe Clayton Bush was in part. I think Demetrius Hill, he told me he played strong safety last year. So I do think he's a guy that could play that role. And Clayton Bush, they've talked about is explicitly a free safety. Maybe
the dime package, we think.
Yeah, and could play in the dime package as well. But they talked about him as a center fielder. I wonder if they had a Clayton Bush to be like, all right, maybe if we have to move Hill up in the box as a strong safety, we could do that. Because, we've seen Demetrius Hill. He looks very capable of playing in the box, how big he is.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable point. I don't know that there's a bigger question I have when we meet with Brett Bielema. And for the next few times we do, then, hey, how's Matthew Bailey? Because you're talking a projected starter. in a heavy turnover, a position of heavy turnover,
Yep.
and a guy who looked really good. Like it isn't like, oh, he's just not just a projected starter. There's no such thing, but a guy who looked good as a freshman, who shows a lot of long-term ability.
So one of the most biggest questions we had was secondary. So to have one of your main pieces that you thought was a given, to have him, still injured, still recovering from injury, 4 weeks out is a concern.